Welcome in everyone to a very special episode of American Joyride. I am joined today by BJ Ganem. He is a former Marine combat veteran, wounded in action, and now he is focused on wellness with other veterans and improving people's lives. And we could not be happier to have BJ here today. He also has some ties to Wisconsin, just like I do. So small world. BJ, thank you very much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I just want to start right at the top. You found yourself in the Marine Corps. How did that happen?
Well, so I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and I earned a Hope Scholarship. So that was the big thing tied to getting the lottery passed in Georgia, right? That they would provide more scholarships for kids to go to college. So I kept a B average and was able to get the Hope Scholarship, and I went to Georgia Southern University for 1 year until they politely asked me not to come back. And I didn't feel like getting a job. Definitely didn't want to move home. I really just wanted to travel the world and fight. And the only people that were offering that was the United States Marine Corps. So I went to the recruiter, said I wanted to sign up. I wanted guaranteed infantry. But I wanted my 10 days leave after boot camp to coincide with St. Patrick's Day in Savannah. So I missed Christmas, New Year's, Super Bowl, all that stuff. So I could have my 10 days leave to be an idiot for St. Patrick's Day in Savannah, which if you haven't been, you need to go.
And what year is this? Is this pre or post 9/11?
Yeah, it's pre 9. This is 96. So
Oh,
I graduated high school in 95 and then tried 1 year of college and see how it worked without going to class. And that didn't work out too well. And so I, 96, December of 96, I stepped on the yellow footprints in Paris Island. And that was all the planning I did. I remember being on the bus heading to Camp Lejeune for a School of Infantry, thinking like, now what? Like I only planned the St. Patrick's Day. And then it was just like, oh, this is 4 years. But it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
so how did you then? You're wounded. Correct me if I'm wrong. In 2004, is that
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
How so? From 96 to 2004, did you get cycled out into the reserves and you get brought back, or were you active duty that whole time?
So I was active duty until 2000. I mean, after this was during the Clinton administration, literally, and I was in an infantry unit. We're running around the woods yelling bang, bang at each other. We didn't have any, you know, everybody was drawing down the military. Everybody thought all that stuff was over. So in 2000, I opted to get out, and but I stayed in the Ready Reserves because obviously I didn't have a job lined up. I was going to take that 3 months of terminal leave, saved up all my leave to find a job. But I liked being an infantry Marine. I just didn't like all the bullshit came with. What I didn't like about active duty was all the hurry up and wait, all the dog and pony shows. Like, it's there's a lot of waste of time in active duty, right? And so I didn't like that aspect. I wanted to have more training opportunities, and quite honestly, in the Ready Reserves, training was abundant. Like you could do all kinds of stuff. A bunch of the guys went to Unitas, which we were able to go down on deployment down in the south of South America. I was just having a second child, so I didn't participate. But that's how I stayed in, and I wanted to be able to have some income. And I initially got a job right out in Wisconsin, working for Nabisco. So I had moved to Wisconsin. My first wife was from there. I met her in DC when I was working in Quantico, and I went to Wisconsin because there was an infantry unit there, and if I was going to stay in the reserves, I wanted to be in infantry. Like in my opinion, I don't know why you'd sign up for the Marine Corps if you're not going to be in the infantry. Like,
Well said. Well said. So I want to get into obviously you get wounded in action. That's in Iraq. But before we get into that specific thing, when you get deployed over there, were you excited? Were you nervous? Like, was it finally go time? Like, what emotions are going through your head now that you've been in for years and now we're going over there?
right. It is. I mean, I want to be clear. Like, I'm not a warmonger. You know
Right.
what I mean? But if
Yeah.
there's going to be a fight, I'm going to raise my hand and be a part of it. So my daughter was born premature, 10 days before 9, so September 1st, 2001. So she was only like 2.1 pounds. And so I was asleep on the hall of the ICU in Madison at St. Mary's. And they woke me up to say that a plane flew into the World Trade Center. And I was thinking like a Cessna, like a little plane. I
Right.
was like, what idiot didn't see the plane? Then I saw what was happening. literally calling the first sergeant and just being like, "Hey, are we going?" He's like, "Just calm down. We got to figure this stuff out." And so, yeah, so it was very surreal, but at the same time, if this was going to be like, let it be me and let it be the Marines that I'm serving with, we were all pumped up to be at the forefront of what was going to happen. Now, I will tell you, being over there and serving in combat, I couldn't be more proud of the Marines that I served with. And when people ask me like the bravest thing I saw, it happened on November 8th when we lost Ramey, O'Donnell, and Warnes immediately to an IED attack. Cruckton and Simon were put on a medevac out of there, and Simon eventually died 9 months later back here in Wisconsin. But we were in a hasty 360, and there was pop shots coming in. There's civilians running all over the place, and then literally three of our really good friends just got annihilated. And none of these men that could have shot into that crowd, not a single one took a shot. The safety of those other people, the civilians that were caught in the middle, was more important than their anger, their revenge, all that stuff. So I think oftentimes that doesn't get communicated, especially in the regular media. But there was a lot of 18, 19, 20, hell, I was 25, or excuse me, 27 over there, that risked our lives not only for our way of life, I hate saying that sometimes, but more so for the people that were around us, because they didn't ask for this.
Right.
And majority of the bad guys that we encountered were from Jordan, were from Iran, were from Syria. I mean,
Yep.
everybody that had a beef with the US came, and then majority of the Iraqis were just trying to get money for their family. And if I looked at it in being in their shoes, as someone invaded America and they had disbanded me and my skill set was no longer of use to them, I would sell it to the highest bidder too. You know what I mean? So, and again, it's just a small portion, right? Because I was
Right.
only there for a few months before I get injured. I got injured on Thanksgiving night of 2004. So I didn't get to see everything. And I know there was some bad stuff happening, but you should be proud of, the Wisconsin unit, the Mad Ghost that they called us over there, that, we did right. And I couldn't be more proud of the men that I served with. The
That's
ones
awesome. I mean, that is very profound to hear, very touching, and it is the level of restraint, and I'm sure due to the level of training,
right.
that's incredible. I mean, the American military trains better than anyone else in the world, and anyone who disagrees with that, frankly, has no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah. Right.
I want to get into that Thanksgiving night
Yeah.
because that night is going to be the night that kind of sets you on this path that we now find yourself here today.
Right.
Um, what happens? Walk us through the injury.
So in the
How you got wounded.
reserves, yeah, in the reserves, as you can imagine, a lot of times we're filling other billets. So I was just an E5 sergeant, right? Nothing special, just a basic Marine infantryman, no special ops or any of that kind of stuff, right? And for the 4 years leading up to when we deployed, I was filling the platoon commander role. But as we get to ILOC and we get these other things, we're picking up a staff sergeant, we're picking up a captain. So instead of bumping down my squad leaders, which were locked on and their squads were really good, I took on this position known as the guide, right? It's kind of a useless position outside of boot camp, right? But what I did there was I drove lead vehicle for every patrol that we did. So we always had a squad on patrol, a squad on rest, and a squad on security. And then we had our weapons attachment. So we lived underneath the bridge, similar to what you'd see on 9094, right? Back here in Wisconsin, underneath an overpass on a 4-lane hardball. So we lived underneath there and we would patrol out. We had about 25-mile circumference area of operations. And our job was to work with the villagers to gain intelligence to keep that main supply route of Tampa open and keep the IEDs off of it. So I went on every single patrol, drove lead vehicle so that we always knew where we had been. So we didn't set patterns, right? So it's a desert. They can see you from far away. We're all wearing camouflage, like, there's no hiding.
Right.
So you have to stay smarter than your enemy, maintaining good dispersions. I mean, I think went through 13 IEDs, I think is what we counted before the last one got me. And most of that was due to good tactics, right? Understanding the battlefield. So that night, We had just gotten, we dropped off some prisoners down at St. Mike's for interrogation. I was actually able to pick up some steaks to bring back. We had confiscated a grill from a quasi officer club, which really irritated me. So I stole their gear, their grill, and went back under the bridge, and we were just cooking up these steaks. We were actually using water bottle boxes and pallet wood for the fire because I forgot to steal charcoal. And cooking up some steaks. I was really fat and happy, and I was almost thinking about not going out. But I had this streak, so I decided to go with it. And what we would do was we would ghost these huge army convoys and wait for them to get attacked, and we'd peel off and do it, do our best to scare the bad guys away. But on that night, on the way back in, um, I ran through a tripwire. This is the first time we encountered a tripwire across the road that was tied to 3 Russian-made 155 artillery shells, and it went off right at my door. Killed my gunner, Ryan Cantafio from Beaver Dam, instantly because the shrapnel went right over his neck protector and got him in the jugular, and there's no way to stop the bleeding. Small ambush afterwards, which prevented the helicopter from landing in, so we had to get trucked out. When I first was hurt, my right leg hurt worse because I had shrapnel in my right calf. And as I stepped out, that's when I realized how bad my left foot was, and that the boot was just spread open and just really, really injured badly. So we had the soft vehicles at that time in 2004, but I had worked with the Motor T at Mama Dia, and we'd gotten sandbags on the floor. We bolstered the side walls. And I was waiting on one little piece to get cut of metal to put into this one, and that's where most of the shrapnel came in. The other one, I caught a lot of glass on the left side of my face, including 3 shards in my left eye. But I was wearing contacts, even though they told DOD says you're not supposed to wear contacts. I wasn't going to wear the birth control glasses, so I just brought a lot of contacts with me. And it was the contact, the doctor said, that actually saved my eye from bursting. It was just enough resistance there. But so the side mirror sent all that glass in because we only had those half steel doors on. So it was surreal. I remember being in the Black Hawk helicopter once, they did the initial stabilization at Mama Dia, and they flew me to Baghdad in a helicopter. And I remember just looking out at the rotors, and it was a clear night, bright moon. I mean, I don't know, were you in Iraq?
No, 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 no. I was never in the military.
Oh, I thought for some reason I read that you were a Marine too. But
No, no, no,
all
no.
right. Okay,
Let
my
me let
bad.
me squash that. I absolutely
Yeah.
was not.
Okay. So I was just so in Iraq, like at nighttime, the clear nights were just amazing. You could see every single star. And then when the moon was out, I mean, you didn't hardly need NVGs. You could see in that desert for miles. And I remember just looking at through the rotors of that Black Hawk helicopter, being like, I didn't plan for this, right? I planned to go over there and, maybe get killed, or maybe come home and then go again, right? But you never plan for the in between. And that was the hardest thing. It wasn't so much losing the leg didn't bother me as much as the fact that I only have a half a combat deployment. And that's still what ate me. That's what ate me in the beginning, was not being there, not finishing the deployment, and to this day, that's what drives my PTSD. If we're going to give it a name, right, is that's what fuels me. And I think that's what eventually led me down the path to veteran advocacy. Was, if I couldn't finish that deployment, I'm going to do something else to help me feel like I can put the pack down.
Well, let me ask you this. When you get wounded and you're on this road to your own recovery, what's the biggest challenge you face outside of what you just said, dealing with the feeling of emptiness in a sense because you didn't finish the deployment? What was the biggest challenge you faced? And then what was something you learned about yourself in that process that you didn't previously know?
The biggest challenge was coming home, um, understanding what it takes to have a free and independent society, right? I mean, the opportunity to have self-determination in this country is unlike any other country that I've ever been to, right? And when you see what happens with sheer tyranny, and then you come back to this country and you just see how we're acting on both sides, all the sides, just how we're taking this immense gift of freedom of the ability for us to do what we want with our lives, right? And see how we're not maximizing that, how we're not taking that seriously, causes this anger, causes this anxiety, right? And trying to figure out a healthy way to say to your fellow countrymen, like, guys, we're better than this, right? And especially now, when you see the amount of rhetoric of civil war, and you see what happens in our cities, like Madison was on fire during 2020. We were part of keeping that down. What they did at the Capitol, it's all garbage. Like, you don't want to go down that route. I mean, you
Right.
can look back in history at times when Iraq was a thriving society, and look at where they're at now. And they've been fighting and fighting and fighting, and it doesn't lead anywhere. Same with Iran. So that was the big thing. What I learned was the only person holding me back is me through that disability. I mean, through going through a ton of surgeries, right? Bunch of washouts to get the trash out of you that's in Iraq. It's a very dirty place. And getting the amputation right, and fighting through. I mean, we call the below the knee amputation, which I have, the paper cut, right? Because of all the amputations, it's probably the easiest one to overcome, but it's still hard to overcome, right? You don't even realize how much your toes and your ankles play into your everyday life and keeping your back and core healthy and all that stuff. So really just learning about there's no easy button on anything, right? But at the end of the day, each one of us are more capable than we know. And that was what I learned. And that's when it just started to be, I don't need permission for any of this stuff. I'm just going to do it. Try to stop me if you can.
I love that attitude. I hope if there's a teenager watching this right now, they're listening to that attitude, because that's a great one. And let's roll with that attitude into what you're doing now, which
Right.
I think is very, very important and very impactful. Sierra Delta, you can see it on BJ's shirt right there in the video. What is it? Why are you involved with it? And what are the goals of it?
So Sierra Delta is a nonprofit organization that I started in 2017. Um, Initially, I was working for the Semper Fi Fund, a phenomenal organization, one of the best in the game. And I was helping out this other organization in Nantucket called Holidays for Heroes. And I got to meet Bill Bishop and his family, who founded Blue Buffalo, the dog food company. It's #1 in the world. I'd been painted by President Bush by this time, and had spent a lot of time with President Bush. He calls me Belushi. At the time, I had shaggier hair, and I can be somewhat of a cut up. But and Tom McCann, which was who founded Holidays for Heroes, and also had a pet company. So the three of them, I was talking about dogs, and how when I was at my lowest point in 2006, just doing all the stereotypical veteran things, right? DUI, get in trouble with fighting, was going through a bad divorce, having to file bankruptcy, checked all the boxes, right? And it was after leaving jail from being arrested for a DUI that I seriously contemplated just checking out. It should have been me that died, not those guys. And at the time, I was living in an apartment, and I was getting my kids every other day or every other weekend too. And I had this old English bulldog that I bought on my very first convalescent leave from Walter Reed, because I'm a boy from Georgia. I was a diehard Bulldogs fan growing up. Served in the Marine Corps. That the mascot is the bulldog, right? So again, stereotypical, nothing special about me. I'm gonna go get a bulldog, right? One of the best choices. You can see his picture, and his urn is behind me. Named him Dozer. He was all head. He was 8 weeks old. I got him just a bunch of wrinkles and head. And from the moment we were together, in the beginning, phantom pains were a nightmare for me. But it didn't matter if he was in a different room, wherever, he would know when they were happening, just instinctively, and come find his way to me and lay on my leg. And that was the best medicine. I took all kinds of different stuff from the VA. Nothing worked like Dozer. But in that dark moment, I could rationalize everybody else away. My family would be better off without me. My friends would be better off without me. Everybody except for this bulldog right here. I can actually show you. right? Let me get that thing.
Oh
So,
man, look at that dog.
right. So he has no special training, no special talent. I mean, the only talents he had was he could get slobber in places you thought were physically impossible to get slobber into, right? Clear a room with his fart. And he was gruff and mean and scared a lot of people, but he was my guy, right? And anybody that he knew he liked too. But if I checked out, he would end up in a shelter. Those type dogs are hard to adopt, and so he would end up being killed. So it was with that realization that all my gusto to end my own life just went away. And I looked myself dead in the mirror and made a deal with myself that no matter what life threw at me, I was going to continue to live a life on the good foot, right? Like just like that James Brown song, right? I got a funky job and I'm paying my bills on the good foot, right? And that was it. Like no matter if the carbon fiber and steel foot that science gave me was holding my weight or the flesh and blood foot that God gave me was holding my weight, I was going to live that life on the good foot and no longer was checking out an option, right? We were going to do this to the end. And that's when I started piecing everything back together. I say this is the moment in time where I pulled my own head out of my ass and started figuring out how I was going to do that because that's what I realized that nobody else could do this for me. It has to be me. It has to start with me. And then if I was going to do it, I was going to do it in a way to where other veterans could learn from me. So I went on and got I stopped I was almost done with a bachelor's degree in business management and I quit and went and got a bachelor's degree in psychology and then got a master's degree from the University of Southern California in social work with an emphasis on military life. So when I was with President Bush, he told me, Belushi, I can give $5 million to any one of these dog organizations and it won't move the needle, right? Tom McCann and Bill Bishop kept asking me, like, what can we do to help more veterans get dogs? We know it works, right? We see these veterans with service dogs. What can we do? So they put me on this path to try to figure it out. So I just started researching. I started visiting all these service dog organizations, talking to a bunch of vets, which I've already done. I was holding all kinds of sessions with Simplify Fund, and I was on the national campaign team of Wounded Warrior Project, working to figure out what this is. And the most common story I kept hearing from all vets was ones like mine. That there was a dog somewhere along the way that made a difference, that they were able to link up with and form a team with similar to what we had in the military. And that's when I started thinking, like, we're doing this all wrong. The average cost for a service dog for a veteran they're reporting is $35,000. And I'm like, why? Because what we miss, what drives our PTSD is not, oh, something bad happened to us, right? Like, it's more so we miss that purpose. We miss that team. We miss the challenge. That's what's wrong with America right now. We don't challenge ourselves anymore. Like anything worth having, you need to go through suffering to get, right? But you need to understand the pathway to get there. It's like working out. It's like trying to make the football team, right?
Right.
You don't just get to walk on to Wisconsin because you want to play football,
Yeah.
right? You got to put the work in. And so I came up with the life buddy concept, which was simply just saying, why are we trying to breed dogs, train them for 2 years to give them to a veteran? That's not what they need. Why don't we let them get whatever dog they want and let's meet them with training that is to their individual needs and lifestyle and then reward them for what they do, reward them for getting better. Just simple things, little high fives or here, Oakley has a good military program. Here, we'll get you some Oakley sunglasses if you walk your dog 20 out of the 30 days and post about it, right? Getting them active, getting them out there and understanding that the sacrifice we made is worth it,
Right.
right? Like there's no reason to, it doesn't, I don't really care who's in office. I don't really care what laws they pass. I could give two craps at local, the state, or the federal level. I could care less. Don't care. What I care about is what we do at the community level.
Right.
And all of our problems can be solved with self-determination, not legislation. We're not going to be able to legislate our way out of these problems. What's going to help is that we got to meet each other where we're at and form communities again. And that's what Sierra Delta is about. And that's why The Life Buddy program focuses on the relationship between the human and the dog, right? No matter what level you need, it doesn't matter to me. You tell us, and then as long as you do what you're supposed to do and you're getting a little bit better every day, we're giving you virtual high fives. We're giving you opportunities to go do some good things because you're getting better. And then the Life Force program focus on the service component. Like just because we took our uniform off doesn't mean that we can't serve. And just because you never joined the military branch of service doesn't mean that you can't serve your country in other ways. Let's come together. Let's build a bridge between the veteran community and the civilian community. And let's make our country better by focusing on our communities, right? Right here where you're at, right? We
Right.
don't have to have these big national laws or whatever. Like I have yet to see, and I've worked in the government for a couple of years and left because it was a nightmare. I've yet to see a governmental social program that produced any really good outcomes at a scalable level. They don't, and that's the big problem. Nobody wants to be a part of a government program. Why would you want to?
Right,
Right?
they're disasters waiting to happen. Let me, when it comes to the dogs, the people getting in the program, like you're like little progress, little steps forward. How quickly do you see people when they come in, they bring their dog? How long does it take before you can see noticeable progress with the average participant?
Weeks, weeks. I mean, literally, the most common theme we hear from veterans is that I knew you're going to train my dog. I didn't know you're going to train me, but I like it.
Nice.
It's just validation, right? Everybody in this country has angst, has anxiety. I say all the time, like, if you don't have PTSD in this world right now, it's because you weren't paying attention, right? These last 4 years have been unlike anything I've ever seen in the 46 years I've been alive. And I'm sure it's replicated in history, and that's great. But what we have to figure out is a way to how we're going to get past it now, you know? How it was done in history, yeah, we can learn from it, but we've got new technology at our fingertips that we've never had before. And that's why we focus on a digital platform, but we're partnering with like VFW and American Legion to utilize between just those two groups, they have 18,001 underutilized clubhouses across the United States. Guess what that is? That's a safe and adequate place for group training with dogs, right? That's a way to bring civilians and veterans together and forge new ways of building that bridge, of attaining wellness from things that we can readily access, like a dog, right? Depending on which survey you look at, it's anywhere from 56 to 62% of American households already have a dog in it,
Right.
right?
We're very
So
pro dog country.
very pro dog country, right? So we don't need a law, especially one if we can't talk about disabilities, why are disabilities even in whether or not you have a dog that can go in public? It should just be strictly focused on the training. There's only three tests that matter in the dog world: canine good citizen, urban canine good citizen, and community canine good citizen. The community canine good citizen is the test for service dogs. So if you and your dog can pass that test, I don't really care why you need it. I know that you can maneuver in public without your dog being a nuisance, right? Because that's what it comes down to. But at the same time, like I'll have veterans call me and say, BJ, they're not letting me and my service dog into this coffee shop. And the first thing I'll say is, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you back out and just see if there's any other coffee shops around before we make a civil rights issue out of this? You know, like, I
Yeah.
mean, because we do have foreigners that come here to be entrepreneurs and maybe they're not as dog friendly, right? But we have to be, we have to pick and choose our fights, right? Like, especially veterans, like, I love being a veteran. Like when people thank me for my service, I don't really know what to say. I used to say you're worth it. I say okay, but and there's a part of me I feel sorry for everybody else that didn't serve. You guys are missing out, right? Like I know I'm missing a leg, but I'm bigger, better, stronger because of it, right? Like there's nothing that can offend me. Like
I
that's the
love that.
you know what I mean? Like there is absolutely nothing that can offend me, and that's what bothers me about where our veteran culture is heading. There seems to be a lot more entitlement. Like USMC stands for United States Marine Corps, but it also stands for you signed a mother contract, right? So I got into the Marine Corps because I wanted to travel the world and fight, right? I wanted to fight the bad guys. And that's what and I knew the inherent risk that came with it. And that's what I hope everybody else that signed up for the military took into consideration, along with the benefits. Those are great. I got my master's, from USC. I would not be able to afford that without my service to this country. So that's a great thank you, right? But veterans need to find a way back into society. And what we see that the VA is offering is what the government always offers. They're offering a way for you to be dependent, right? And so many of these veterans are getting on what's called individual unemployability, which means that either have a 70% rating or higher, and then they'll get paid at the 100% rate so long as they don't work or make more than $14,000 a year. And the only way to get those ratings, to get the mental health from the VA, is to say that you are broke and broken. That's not a healthy way to engage with somebody that you are saying that you want to make better, right? Because if all the carrots are for them to stay worse, like in order to have a PTSD rating, you got to drink a lot, do drugs, you got to not be able to hold down a job or stay in school or maintain a relationship. What? No, let's reward these men and women for getting over the hump, right? Let's get out of this victimization celebration thing that we're in this country, that there's no glory in being a victim.
I
There's
love that.
glory in being a victor, right? Like bad things are going to happen to you. Like, spoiler alert, right? Life is hard, right? But it's not that you want to keep bad things happening to you. You want to do your best to have situational awareness and keep yourself out of certain situations, but you can't live in fear. And then you cannot completely break down just because one bad thing happened to you. Are you still breathing? Then you are still affected. Let's go. And that's what we're trying to do at Sierra Delta. We're trying to provide wellness, especially to our veteran community, through service to others and the love of dogs, right? And we're inviting the civilians to join us. Like, we're just rolling out a supporter membership program where veterans get into Sierra Delta for free. We have ID Me integrated into our website. We verify your service in 30 seconds. We're not an organization that says you had to be in combat or that you had to serve overseas or that you only post 9/11, right? That's the thing that drives me crazy. You have so many of these organizations that pick and choose which veterans they want to work with. Why? Like, either it's a thank you for your service, or what are we doing? Like the post 9/11 only nonprofits really have my head scratched, because when I look back to my heroes, I was born in 76. So uh, the Vietnam era veterans were a big part of my childhood, right? The Rambo and all these other movies. And you saw, like, no wars are popular, right? Like, we didn't want to go into World War II either. Like, we got dragged into that war kicking and screaming, right? But we do what our country asked us to do. Like, I didn't say we had to go to Iraq or Afghanistan. Y'all did, you know? and I did it. And so did the Vietnam era veterans, right?
Or
Especially
Black Hawk Down guys.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're put in place where our representatives, and I don't care which side of the fence you're on, they all control the purses and money. War makes them money, right? So I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I am a realist, right? Like, there is nothing there is no perfect scenario, right? We have to deal with what we have. And so I, I just wanted to get rid of all the BS, and let's just truly try to set up a sustainable and reasonable way to help these veterans attain wellness within their own lives, right? And oh, by the way, in this country, we kill 800,000 healthy, trainable, and adoptable dogs every year. So here, veterans, I got a new mission for you. We're not going to be fighting terrorists, but we're going to be doing our best to try to adopt a dog from the shelter that would normally be killed, work with that dog in training with a training professional overseeing it with videos and healthy routines. But we were sent all over the world training people we couldn't communicate with. We got the United States taxpayer has spent billions of dollars having us be trained to be some of the best trainers and warriors that have ever walked this earth. So let's showcase it. Let's show what we can do. This country needs veteran leadership more now than ever. But it's not at Washington, D.C. It's not at any of your state capitals, because none of those places matter anymore, in my opinion. That ship has sailed. We've lost all trust. We need to start doing it at the community level. We need to start doing it with each other, right? The local level. And then it's just basic common sense stuff, right? The golden rule: treat others like you'd want to be treated yourself, and then let's solve these problems.
I do. I know that you also helped out and did some work with the Boston bombing
Yeah.
victims. And that to me is very fascinating because that was an attack on just a civilian event,
Right.
random people running a marathon, just getting some exercise. Very different from war, where
Right.
things might spill over. So give the audience can kind of compare and contrast that. What's that like when now we're dealing with victims of a terrorist attack in downtown Boston compared to guys who are wounded or maybe suffering mentally from war overseas?
Right. I mean, I remember exactly where I was when that happened. I was in New York for the Semper Fi Fund speaking at an event. And I remember seeing it on my hotel room TV and just being like, no, 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 no. We all went overseas. If someone's got beef with us, you go fight us overseas. You don't bring it into our neighborhoods, right? And so I called Karen Gunther, the founder and CEO of Semper Fi Fund, and actually a couple other vets had done the same thing. And we were like, we need to get there. We don't know what we're going to do, but we need to get there and let them know that they're going to be okay. And so we landed 3 days after the bombs went off. And we went to Boston Mass General. We went to uh, Beth Israel. All the hospitals, they were spread out all over the place. And I remember thinking as we were getting in we had this van that we rented, like, oh crap, we're not talking to military people. We got to get ready for a lot of, you know, just panic, right? Just thinking there was going to be mass panic, and it wasn't. I mean, the people that I met that were injured, the doctors and the nurses, the amount of grit and tenacity and just sheer compassion, sheer ability to just improvise, adapt, and overcome was just, I mean, talk about filling my cup up with just what makes America so good.
I love it.
It was just being there. And then we've maintained these great relationships since there. And again, like, we didn't do anything. They did it all themselves. I mean, but the stark contrast was, the insurance companies, if they wanted a water leg or a running leg, or like Heather Abbott, one of her first questions to me was, will I be able to wear high heels? Because she had an amputation below her knee. And I was like, ma'am, I've done a lot in my prosthetic, but I have never wore high heels. So I don't know the answer to that question. But she does. She has, and she rocks those things. But the insurance company looked at all those other legs as luxury items and would not cover it. And I was just blown away at how little our insurance does for people in actual need. Like, even Boston bombing, like, how are you going to say no when you're build huge buildings all over the country, sponsoring every sport event out there, and you're going to tell these people that were injured by terrorists
Right.
that their desire to live a good life is a luxury?
It seems
No.
ridiculous. Absolutely
So
ridiculous.
most of them have started their own foundations to help other people. And that's one of the things that I want veterans to realize is that, um, you know, trust me, you do not want socialized medicine. Okay. Like, I get the majority of my healthcare from the VA, and I had to get a master's in social work from the University of Southern California to understand how to maneuver it, right? How to actually get it to work for me. But at the same time, we've got to have some sort of common sense when it comes to delivering these type of services. I think there's a good hybrid that we can do. And I think if you take the VA's model, because we really don't need the VA and the DoD. I mean, I really think the DoD should own veterans from the moment we raise our right hand until we die. Like, why are they allowed to just move us over to the VA after service when they have 4 times the amount of budget? And maybe if they had to take care of us, they wouldn't be as reckless in putting us in all these different places. You know what I mean? And then you can take the VA system and make it your domestic health care, where people could sign up for a job in medical field, which we're going to need, right? And get deployed in the continental United States wherever we need you for those things for 8 years, and then move on if you want to. But that way we get choice, but we also have a good baseline. I don't know. I mean, these things seem simple to me, like the dog issue. Like,
Right.
why are we have 5-year wait list, and some of these organizations are saying it costs $65,000 per dog? And if you add up all of these organizations that say they're helping veterans with dog, it only equals about 1,000 dogs a year. There's 150,000 vets that are estimated to need a medical assistant service dog. That means we're on pace to solve that problem in 150 years. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
This is America, right? Like this should work so much easier. And this is what we're trying to do at Sierra Delta. We're reorganizing the infrastructure that already exists so that it benefits the veterans. So they come to one place and then they can access the full spectrum of dogs and then provide reasonable and sustainable support on that, but also ask them to utilize their skills in that to help reduce the cost and raise the positive outcomes that we see, right? Because nobody wants to be a charity case.
Right. No, it's not in human nature to want to be a charity case. I mean, there's dignity in advancement, there's
Right.
dignity in progress, right? Now, you did tell me something that I got to bring up, especially with this Badgers football helmet right over
That's
my
right.
shoulder, that Barry Alvarez, the former Badgers coach and AD, legendary figure in the state, he wrote you a letter when you were recovering from being wounded in action.
Yeah.
Tell the audience a little bit about what that was all about.
I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, first and foremost, you know, everybody in this country, I can't thank them enough for just how they welcomed us back, right? There's always a part of me that wished I could take some of that and just give it to the Vietnam era vets and everybody else. But somebody knew Barry Alvarez and knew me, and they briefly told them what had happened, and I was back home in Reedsburg, and he actually took the time to write me a nice little card and saying that he was rooting for me and all that stuff, and it meant a lot, because he's a huge figure. I mean, you remember
Yeah.
what Wisconsin football was like before he came,
It
right?
was terrible. It was as bad as
Terrible,
it got.
bad as it got, and he's gone over and above too. He's worked with a lot of other veteran organizations. I was able to get down on the field when I was up and walking, and just really great guy. It's a great program. My daughter graduates there from there this April. I couldn't be more proud. She made the dean's list last year. My son has graduated from UW Lacrosse, but I mean Barry's just. I mean he's everything you would hope he would be. There's some of these public figures that once you meet them behind the curtain, they can be somewhat shady or whatnot, or not
Yeah,
who
it's very
who, who
true.
they who they present themselves to be. He's not that way. From what little that I had with him, right? And just again, it means a lot when someone takes the time. It's like George W. Bush. You know, I first met him in the hospital in 2004, and he spent a lot of time with me and stayed in touch. And he stayed in touch with a lot of us. He has the Team 43, and he takes that responsibility seriously. So as much as like I can rail about how I don't like politicians, I know that there's a handful of them that are really good people. And in my opinion, George W. Bush is one of those.
I love that. And I'm a huge Badger fan. There's a lot of Badger fans watching this. I remember growing up watching Barry Alvarez, and then obviously, Brett Bielema came after that and all that stuff. But when you told me that, I thought that was one of the coolest things
Yeah,
imaginable. And it should make Wisconsin fans feel proud to know that
absolutely.
Alvarez took that time. Speaking of football, I know you do a little flag football. Is that correct?
Right. That's right.
Okay.
So
What's,
yeah,
yeah, I got to know what's that about?
Chris Visser actually he's a longtime sports producer, and his sister is Leslie Visser, the first female in the NFL Hall of Fame, the legendary sideline reporter. Back in 2012, I think it was, he reached out to me that he was doing this flag football event pitting wounded warrior amputated veterans against NFL legends. And was I interested? I was like, heck yeah. Like, I played high school football. It was nothing great, but it was, one of the highlights, of my life. Like everybody loves football, right?
Right.
And so it just kind of grew. We did it for 10 years. We played before Super Bowls. I was a guest on Letterman because of it back in, I believe it was 2013 or 2014. And that was awesome to be I went on right after Louis C.K. and was sitting in the chair and interviewing with Letterman. It was awesome. And we continue to do it. And this year we didn't do it for the first time because we're actually moving to have it on national TV. We're going to be calling it the Veterans Bowl. And the relationships that we built with these NFL players, they are the most like the military people that I've ever encountered, in that they have that same hole in them when they're done, right? And you never know when you're going to be done. Like the
Right.
average career in the NFL is like 3 years or something like that.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's three
Yeah.
years. Yep.
Yeah. And the majority of them don't make a ton of money. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is how much those individual players have to pay the club for their food, for their medical, for all that other stuff. So we were seeing a lot of these similar type injuries, especially we're talking about head injuries, we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about disassociation from who you were. And it really brought to light. I mean, Nate Boyer is a good friend of mine, and he has the Emerging Vets and Players organization. And just being a part of that group too, and doing those workouts with professional athletes and military people, there's a synergy there. So we are working to make this a bigger televised production and bring a lot of awareness to both sides of the ball. That's why we're calling it Veterans Bowl.
I love
And
that.
hoping to encourage a lot more awareness into our brains and how we can protect them, how we can help them heal so that we can avoid a lot of the issues that come with brain damage. And from a guy that has enjoyed Saturdays and Sundays for as long as I can remember, I think these guys deserve it as much as we do. Like, they bring us a lot of joy. I know that the whole Kaepernick thing kind of sullied football for a little bit, but I think we got to get past that, and the majority of the men that I've met from the NFL and even women. So Jen Welter's a good friend of ours and a supporter. She's the first NFL female coach,
Right.
and she played a lot. So a lot of these females too, they understand their role and they understand that they want to give back as well. And again, that's where we got to get to with our social programs. There's a way for give and take, and not just always give or always take. And so that's what this Veterans Bowl is working towards. It's going to be in Vegas. So the first time the Super Bowl is in Vegas is going to be the first appearance of this Veterans Bowl, taking, these relationships and all that we've learned for the past 10 years and having some fun with it. When you think about it, it's more like the Harlem Globetrotters, right? So the refs help us out because obviously these guys are old and retired, but they're still world-class
Yeah.
athletes. And we're old and retired too, and we're but you'll be amazed at what you see. We have Mike Smith that's super fast. He only has one arm, and Kenny Mayne, who always plays, and he always, like, there's guys out there making one arm catches because they have no choice.
Right.
So it's a lot of fun, and it's another great way to try to, I don't like the pity worship that's happening around veterans in this country. Like, stop. Like, we're still the badasses that we said we were, and we want back into the society that we have sacrificed so much for. But we're not going to go into this victimization type mentality. We're not going to take on this woke culture, right? We're going to push back a little bit, but with respect. Just like we did in 2020. There was a bunch of protests after the George Floyd killing, and they were marking up the museum here in Madison, the Veterans Museum.
Down by the Capitol, down by the state
Right
Capitol.
by the Capitol, yeah.
Best museum in the state of Wisconsin.
So great, right? So it was getting vandalized every day,
Oh.
and the Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs wasn't going to do anything. I met with them. They flat out told me they were not going to do anything about it. So what we did was a bunch of veterans. We showed up every morning about 5:30 in the morning and just painted over it, cleaned it up. It was clean before everybody came to work. And we just kept going on Facebook Live saying, hey, we want to talk. We're not here to fight, but we're not going to stand for this. You're not marking up this museum. And eventually they came and talked to us. And we sat down, we had a conversation. At first they were mad that, we were covering up their artist's work. And we're like, hey, man, we're not here to argue that. This is our place, right? And the stories that are in there are important to us. And we don't want you painting on it. And we're not going to fight you over it. But you're saying it takes you 8 hours to paint it. It takes us 12 minutes to clean it up. So we can go all day. They eventually they eventually came around to see that, hey, we're not your enemy, right? I'm not trying to quell your free speech at all or any beef. And there's a lot of what you say that I agree with. There's a lot that I don't agree with, and I'm willing to work through that. But we're not marking up this museum, right?
Right.
And eventually they came around to our way of thinking, and then they were the ones protecting it. And again, those are the things that we need to do in this country. That's what makes free speech so important, right? We cannot just legislate that you can't say this. No, you need to maintain respect. We need to bring back the ability to debate, to
Right.
to talk about things, to write. Let's spend some more time to write. Like, Twitter is making us crazy because you can only do so many things, right? I think it's a very important function, but I think we need to get back and spend some more time on issues before we start formalizing our opinions.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And look, You won't find a bigger free speech proponent than who's sitting on the other side
Damn
of this
right.
interview. Sounds like you're the exact same
I
way.
am the
America
exact
needs
same
more
way.
of that. All right, final question. I always enjoy asking this to veterans. When you look back, I think you said you were 46 years old. When you look back at the last few decades, what's the one thing that when you close your eyes at night, you just think to yourself, man, I am so proud of this one thing?
Wow. I mean, if I'm looking at where I close my eyes at night, it's my kids. I have
Perfect
four
answer.
kids, and I've always been a punk kid myself, right? I refused to kind of grow up sometimes. And I was worried. I remember when I first became a father, like, am I going to be able to do this? Like, I hope they're not going to just learn all the bad stuff. But they have been phenomenal human beings. I couldn't be more proud of them. I have a 23-year-old, a 21-year-old, and a 9 and 7, and out of everything I've done in my life, that's what I'm most proud of. Out of some of the things that have happened, being a part of President Bush's Portraits of Courage, having my portrait painted, having him tell my story, it's unlike it's surreal, right? Like he's the 43rd president that has
Yeah.
ever existed, and he's the only one that took time to try to articulate normal people like us story in a way that I thought was just magical. So, those are it, along with a long list of other things. I tell very constantly, I'm the luckiest man I know. I'm so grateful for all the people in my life and all the things that I'm able to do. And I wouldn't be able to do it without great people like yourself, lending a hand and giving me platforms and allowing me to talk too much sometimes and and just be
Well,
out there living a life on a good foot.
Well, VJ, I got to tell you, this was an awesome interview. I'm thinking maybe before this Veterans Bowl next year, we circle this back and you can do a little preview of what's going to go down in
Absolutely.
Vegas.
Yeah.
Um, but hey, I thank you very much. You are welcome back on this show at any point in time. You've been an outstanding guest. It's great to see a fellow guy, even though you're not originally from Wisconsin, a
Sure.
Wisconsinite now,
Right.
first one ever, or not one of the very few on the show. So this has been awesome. Thank you very much.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been here for 23 years, so I guess I am pretty much a Wisconsinite by this
You
time.
are.